"Sir, you can't be here. I have a meeting upstairs, and with who?" The lobby's waterfall whispered over slate stone, a constant hush beneath the click of heels and the soft thrum of the air conditioner. The man at the center of it, tall, calm, a dark suit tailored with quiet precision, slid a plain visitor card across the desk. Light glanced off its laminated edge, a small flare that drew the guard's eye but did not soften the guard's tone. "ID, please," the guard said. He wore the company's blue blazer, and the kind of smile people used when they wanted to be polite but keep a door closed. The man reached into his breast pocket. Not rushed, not rattled. He set a leather wallet on the marble, opened it, and placed a driver's license beside the visitor card. Then, as if unsure whether he was offering too much or not enough, he laid down something else. A thin black keycard without a logo, the edges worn as though it had been thumbed for years. The guard barely glanced at the keycard. "This isn't valid," he said. "We issued new access months ago." Behind them, the elevator chimed. 2 employees in matching hoodies stepped out, laughing about a product launch. One of them saw the man at the desk and offered a polite nod, the kind you gave to a stranger who looked like he knew where he was going. The man did not move. "I'm expected on 19, he said. His voice carried no threat, only the steadiness of someone used to rooms that tested him. "Who are you meeting?" the guard asked again, fingers tapping a rhythm against the monitor. The rhythm was not unkind. It was trained. He gave a name. The guard typed. The screen flashed something the guard did not expect. His face changed by a degree, uncertain then resolved. "I don't see your appointment," he said. "If you step aside, I'll call up." A manager approached from behind the desk, a woman with a neat bob and a laminated badge on a lanyard. She read the situation and was not change bone. He looked at the photo only a beat. Then he straightened, rested both hands on the desk, and said, "My name is Leonard Clark," the manager typed. The name made her sit up. A line formed behind him. Delivery driver. Intern consultant, shifting from foot to foot. Glancing at their phones. The impatience of a workday leaking into the air. "Mr. Clark," the manager said, tone smoothing. "If you'll wait outside, we'll have someone come down." "I will wait here," he answered. A second guard drifted closer, posture tense but professional. "Sir, policy says—" "Policy has an exception," Leonard said. "Not raised, not loud." He slid the unmarked keycard forward again with 2 fingers, the way a pianist might touch a single note and let it ring. "Call up." The manager picked up the desk phone. Her finger hovered above the keypad, then settled. She dialed. 1 ring, 2, 3. Voices rose at the back of the lobby. A small cluster of employees had noticed the scene, trading glances. Not gawking. Just watching in that careful way people do when they sense something is happening that ought to be ordinary but isn't. Executive floor, a tinny voice answered on the line. "This is front desk," the manager said, eyes on Leonard. "I have a Mr. Leonard Clark asking for access to 19. Silence crackled. The waterfall kept its soft rain. The elevator chimed again. "Front desk," the voice returned. "Please hold Mr. Clark and do not let him up." The manager swallowed. The second guard took a half-step nearer. Leonard's gaze did not flinch. "On what grounds?" the manager asked, a thin thread of disbelief in her tone, as if she heard herself becoming part of a moment that would not read well in an email later. Security flagged. "He's not on today's list," the voice said. "Have him escorted out." The line went dead. The manager placed the receiver down with care. Around them, the lobby seemed to hold its breath. She lifted her chin. "Mr. Clark," she said, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Leonard Clark looked at her, then at the photograph on the wall, the cardboard sign, the younger eyes. "1 heartbeat, 2. Whose company is this?" he asked, enjoying this. Tap subscribe for tomorrow's story. Part 1. Act 1. The man behind the name. The guard shifted, unsure whether to speak again. Leonard Clark didn't move. He simply drew a quiet breath as if gathering a lifetime of composure in a single moment. Outside the glass doors, the city shimmered with mid-morning light, traffic glinting, horns threading through the hum. Inside, silence grew heavy enough to feel. The second guard stepped forward, but Leonard lifted a hand, small, polite. "Absolute before you make another call," he said softly. "Look up the founder's portrait in the boardroom." The manager hesitated. Her lips parted. words catching behind the realization that perhaps she had missed something vital. Still, she nodded to the guard. "Stay with him," she murmured, and disappeared behind the frosted doors leading to the staff elevators. The quiet walk Leonard turned away from the desk and paced the edge of the lobby. His reflection followed in the marble floor. A man in his 60s, close-cropped silver hair, a stance both tired and upright. Each step echoed faintly under the soft fall of water behind him. To anyone else, it looked like a stranger waiting for a meeting. But to Leonard, this lobby was a map of memories. He remembered when the floor wasn't marble, when it was raw concrete, and the waterfall was a leaking pipe they had turned into a feature for lack of budget. He remembered the laughter of the small team who'd believed in an idea, to build software that helped small communities manage their finances. A mission that had grown, decade after decade, into the billion-dollar company now called Clark Systems. But time had a way of erasing faces, especially when those faces stopped showing up on the executive floor. The reason he came it had been 3 years since Leonard stepped back from daily operations. Retirement, they'd called it, though he had never used that word. The board wanted youth, new vision, fresh branding. He'd agreed, reluctantly but gracefully remaining as chairman emeritus, a ceremonial role with few invitations attached. Then last week, a letter had arrived at his old address. Not a printed one, but handwritten in blue ink, his late wife's favorite color. It was from a longtime employee, Denise, who'd worked as a janitor since day one. The letter was short, shaky. "Mr. Clark, they're letting people go without notice. They're saying it's to save costs. But I see the numbers, something isn't right. Please come see it for yourself." He hadn't planned a scene. He simply wanted to understand. The waiting. The elevator doors opened again. The manager returned, her face pale. She glanced once at Leonard, then at the guards. "Could you both step aside a moment?" They obeyed, uncertain. "Mr. Clark," she said quietly, "the executive office is sending someone down. Please wait here." Leonard inclined his head. "Thank you." For the first time, her tone softened. "I didn't know. Your photo doesn't do you justice." "That's all right," he said. "I'm not here to be recognized." Upstairs, 19 floors above, in a glass-walled boardroom, the new CEO stood with his hands on the table. His name was Ethan Ward, mid-30s, bright smile, confident stride. On the monitor beside him, a live security feed showed Leonard in the lobby, composed, motionless. "He really showed up," Ethan muttered. "What does he want?" One of the executives replied, "He doesn't have voting rights anymore, Ethan. You could just let security handle it." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He's not just anyone. PR risk, get legal on standby. I'll handle it." He straightened his tie and pressed the elevator button. Back in the lobby, Leonard stood by the photo wall again, reading the brass plaques beneath each decade's milestone. There was one gap where the company's history had quietly stopped. No photo of the past 3 years. Just a blank frame waiting. The manager approached, whispering, "They're coming down now, sir." Leonard nodded. "Good, it's time we talked." The elevator chimed. A man stepped out, phone still in hand, posture sharp and rehearsed. "Mr. Clark," Ethan said, extending a hand. "Didn't expect to see you here today." Leonard shook it gently. "I can tell." "Let's take this somewhere private," Ethan said, flashing a smile toward the onlookers. "We wouldn't want to block the lobby." Leonard glanced around. Seems it was never mine to block. As they walked toward the elevator, whispers followed, half in disbelief, half in awe. Some employees were already searching his name online. Others just watched, phones raised discreetly, recording the quiet walk of a man being escorted out of the company that bore his name. Part 2. Act 2A. The meeting upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than 19 floors. Ethan stood with a polite smile frozen on his face, one thumb tapping the screen of his phone. Leonard stood beside him, eyes fixed on the soft glow of the panel lights rising. 5. Ati, 12. The hum of machinery filled the silence. Somewhere above, the faint echo of typing drifted through the building's ventilation. Life in motion, unaware that the man beside them had built the first version of that data system in his garage 30 years ago. When the elevator doors opened, Ethan stepped out first. "This way, please." Leonard followed into a corridor lined with motivational posters, Fresh branding, smooth slogans about innovation, diversity, and change. The walls gleamed white. Even the air smelled curated, faintly citrus, expensive. They entered the executive conference room. It was vast and glass-walled, overlooking the city like a throne room. A long table stretched across the floor, half a dozen faces waiting. Department heads, a corporate lawyer, and one uneasy HR director. Ethan gestured to a chair at the far end. "Please sit." Leonard remained standing. The tension builds. "I'll make this brief," Ethan began, clasping his hands. "We appreciate your passion, Mr. Clark. But since your departure, company policy requires any former executive to request access formally. You understand it's protocol." Leonard's gaze swept across the table, resting on the lawyer. "Protocol," he said quietly, "is a word people use when they don't want to say no outright." A ripple passed through the room. Ethan smiled thinly. "We're not saying no. We just need to protect confidential data." "Data?" Leonard asked. "The kind built on the algorithm I designed? Or the one that used my patents, still licensed in my name?" The lawyer leaned forward. "Those patents were transferred during the merger, sir." Leonard's eyes narrowed a fraction. "Transferred, yes, but not without conditions. I kept one clause intact. Section 4C, the lawyer blinked. "Which clause?" "The right to audit the company's use of all derived software in the interest of ethical compliance." The room went still. Ethan's jaw twitched. "That's a courtesy clause," he said. "We've never enforced it." "You've never needed to," Leonard replied. "Until now, the revelation." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, the same one Denise had written. He set it on the table gently, like evidence at trial. "This came to my home last week," he said. "From someone you call non-essential staff. She's seen payrolls vanish, teams dissolved, and funds redirected to shell consultancies. She believes your efficiency program is stripping communities of their promised software credits." And she's right. Ethan leaned back, composure cracking for just a moment. "You're making serious claims, sir. If you're accusing this company of misconduct, I suggest you—" "I'm not accusing," Leonard interrupted softly. "I'm observing." The air felt heavier. The HR director shifted in her chair. "Mr. Clark, we've implemented cost control, but no one's been wronged." Leonard looked at her kindly. "Do you believe that?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her eyes drifted to the window. The public witness. Outside the glass wall, employees moved through the open floor. A few had noticed the meeting in progress, curiosity pulling them toward the transparency. Some recorded discreetly on phones. One young intern mouthed, "Is that him?" Ethan saw the eyes, the cameras, the silent gathering beyond the glass. He rose abruptly and pressed a button on the wall. The glass dimmed to opaque. The skyline disappeared, replaced by reflections of tense faces. "This conversation is confidential," he said sharply. "Mr. Clark, I'll ask again, why are you here?" Leonard looked down the long table. "Because a company's name carries its founder's promise," he said. "And when that promise is broken, so is the name." Ethan's tone hardened. "You don't run this place anymore." "No," Leonard said quietly. "But I built it so no one could run it without integrity." The small wind, the door opened. The manager from the lobby stepped in, hesitant. "Excuse me, sir," she said to Ethan, "but there's a crowd downstairs. People are asking questions. Some reporters, too." Ethan paled. "Reporters?" "Yes, sir. Someone posted a video." Ethan turned toward the dimmed glass as though trying to see through it. Leonard stayed calm, hands clasped before him. "Then perhaps," Leonard said softly, "it's time the truth wasn't hidden behind tinted glass." Ethan glared. "You think this will make you a hero?" "No," Leonard replied. "I think it might make us accountable." The silence stretched. The hum of the building seemed louder than before. Leonard picked up the letter and tucked it back into his coat. "I'll be back tomorrow morning," he said, "with documentation," and with that he turned toward the door, the elevator waiting like judgment itself. Part 3, Act 2B, The Return and the Crossroads. The night after the confrontation, the city outside Leonard Clark's penthouse window looked different, quieter, though the traffic still pulsed below. He sat in the half-light with papers spread across his table, old contracts, digital printouts, audit logs. Each document bore his handwriting from another lifetime, proof that he had once imagined this company as something more than numbers. He replayed the lobby guard's voice in his head. "You can't be here." Then Ethan's voice, "You don't run this place anymore." He understood both. The first came from ignorance. The second, from fear. But Leonard also knew this. Truth could be forgotten, but not erased. The letter and the proof on. The table lay Denise's letter again, creased from being folded too many times. Next to it he placed a flash drive, its metallic surface catching the city lights. The data it held came from an old network access path he'd left open years ago, a backdoor only he knew. It wasn't illegal. It was insurance. He had used it that afternoon, quietly retrieving 1 week's worth of transaction logs. The evidence was clear. Millions redirected through third-party shells tied to the same executive accounts now running efficiency programs. He whispered to the empty room. They turned stewardship into strategy. He closed the laptop and leaned back. The city lights reflected in his glasses like fading constellations. The decision, he could expose them publicly, file lawsuits, summon the old board allies. But that wasn't his way. He didn't want vengeance. He wanted the company to remember its soul. That night he drafted a letter, formal, simple, deliberate. It began, "To the current leadership of Clark Systems as founder and guardian of its ethical charter, I will be conducting an independent review effective immediately. Refusal to comply will trigger legal clause 4C of our original incorporation. Enforceable in federal court. Transparency is not optional. It's overdue." He signed it with a pen his wife had given him years ago, its engraving still faintly legible. "Keep building good things." The next morning. When Leonard arrived at the office the next day, the atmosphere was different. A cluster of employees lingered near the lobby cafe, murmuring about last night's viral clip. An elderly man turned away from the company bearing his own name. The caption had read simply, "They didn't know who he was." News feeds scrolled on every screen. Comment sections flooded with disbelief, sympathy, pride. Some old employees even posted photos of Leonard at early company picnics, handing out hot dogs, laughing, sleeves rolled up. The lobby guards stood straighter as he entered. The same manager met him at the door, her tone careful. "Mr. Clark, the executive floor is expecting you." "Are they?" Leonard said softly. "Yes, sir." She handed him a fresh access badge. The name on it glowed white against black. Leonard Clark, founder. The crossroads upstairs, Ethan waited in the same boardroom. His eyes were ringed with exhaustion. "You've made quite a storm," he said, voice tight. Leonard placed his leather folder on the table. "Storms clear the air." Ethan gestured to the lawyer beside him. "You don't need to make this ugly, Leonard. We can issue a statement. Say it was a misunderstanding." Leonard opened the folder and slid a document across the glass. "This isn't about statements. It's about truth. You've been moving community grant money into marketing accounts to inflate stock performance." "I traced it." Ethan froze. The lawyer's face drained of color. "That's a misunderstanding too?" Leonard asked. The air pulsed with tension. Ethan leaned forward, his voice a whisper now. "You're threatening to destroy everything we built." "No," Leonard said. "I'm trying to save what we meant." The HR director, same woman from before, spoke quietly, trembling slightly. "Mr. Clark, if what he says is true, we have a duty to the employees, to the communities, to shareholders." Ethan turned on her. "You'll regret that." Leonard's tone sharpened just enough to cut the silence. "Threats are what men make when they've run out of truth." He stood. "I'm invoking Clause 4C. Full audit starts now. You can cooperate or contest it publicly. Either way, the outcome will be the same." The moment of pause. As he walked toward the door, Ethan called after him. "You think anyone still cares who you are?" Leonard stopped, half-turned. "I think they care who we become." He stepped into the hallway. Behind him, the first cracks in the executive alliance began to show. Quiet phone calls, sidelong glances, fear masquerading as protocol. Outside the glass, employees had gathered again, their faces pressed to the dimmed partition, waiting for someone, anyone, to tell them what kind of company they worked for. The crossroads had come, and this time, Leonard wasn't leaving quietly. Part 4. Twist. The power. Flip morning light spilled across the boardroom glass, cutting the table in half, one side bright, one in shadow. Leonard Clark stood in that seam, halfway between the company's past and its present. He placed a slim gray laptop on the table. Its logo was scratched, the corners worn. "This," he said quietly, "is the original Clark Systems prototype." Ethan frowned. "A museum piece," Leonard smiled faintly. "A living one." He pressed a single key. The old interface appeared. Simple blue code, no branding, no polish. Then he typed a password, 10 characters long. The screen flickered, split, and connected to a secure portal. Lines of text scrolled rapidly across the display. "Founding access override verified." Ethan's face paled. "What is that?" "The root system," Leonard said. "Every platform update since day one still passes through this core. The merger couldn't erase it. You could only rename it." He turned the laptop toward the board. "You may not realize it, but every audit server still authenticates against this key. When you remove my credentials, you didn't remove my authority. You just buried it." The HR director leaned forward. "Are you saying you still have access to company oversight?" Leonard nodded. "Limited, but enough." The forgotten clause. He reached into his folder again and laid a photocopy of the incorporation charter on the table. "When Clark Systems went public, I insisted on an ethics clause. It required a dormant verification system tied to this key. If unethical practices were detected, unauthorized transfers, false reporting, or staff exploitation, the system could alert the Federal Commission directly." The lawyer blinked. "That clause was symbolic. No one expected you to activate it." Leonard met her eyes. Symbols are only powerless when no one remembers them. He turned the laptop back, clicked a final line of code, and entered a timestamp. A soft beep filled the silence. "Audit mode. Active." The ripple downstairs, screens flickered in the accounting department. Notifications began populating automatically. Internal flags, alerts, data requests. Within minutes, a chain reaction spread across the company's intranet. Employees looked up from their desks, confused, watching their monitors flood with the same message. Ethical audit. Founding oversight active. Do not interfere. The same phrase echoed on projectors, in hallways, even on the lobby display wall where the company slogan usually appeared. The digital waterfall behind the reception desk dimmed, replaced by the founder's old motto, "Integrity is the true profit." The standoff Ethan shot to his feet. "You can't do this. You're exposing internal systems to accountability," Leonard said. "You'll destroy investor confidence." Leonard faced him steadily. "Then rebuild investor trust." "That's your job," Ethan's voice cracked. "You've lost your mind." "Possibly," Leonard said softly, "but not my memory." The HR director, trembling, stood beside Leonard. "Sir," she said to Ethan, "if the founder's clause is legitimate, legal has done the rest." "Integrity is like light," he said. "You can't keep it dimmed forever." The moment of realization, Ethan slumped into his chair, hands over his face. The lawyer closed her folder slowly. The HR director whispered to Leonard, "What happens now?" Leonard exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing. "Now we let the truth work." He picked up his old key card, the same unmarked one from the lobby, and placed it flat on the table. This used to open doors. Today it opened eyes. He walked toward the elevator, every step echoing against the polished floor. As the doors closed, his reflection met his gaze in the mirrored steel. Older, quieter, but unbroken. When he reached the lobby, dozens of employees looked up. They didn't speak, just stood aside, parting like a tide. Some began to clap. Soft at first, then stronger. The manager smiled through tears. "Welcome back, Mr. Clark," he nodded once. "Let's rebuild." Part 5. Fallout. The reckoning by noon. Clark Systems was no longer just a company. It was a headline. Across the city's news feeds, notifications chimed in unison. Founder activates hidden oversight system. Corporate scandal unfolds in real time. Reporters gathered outside the sleek glass tower, their cameras reflecting the company's mirrored facade. Employees watched from behind the tinted windows, uncertain whether they were witnessing an ending or the start of a reckoning. Inside, the air was electric. Departments that had rarely spoken were now trading hurried messages. Legal teams scrambled to interpret Leonard Clark's long-forgotten clause. And in the center of it all, the HR director, Mara Quinn, stepped into the role no one else dared take. Messenger between the old guard and the new conscience. The internal storm at 12:47 p.m. A company-wide email arrived in every inbox. Subject line: Transparency Notice and Founders Audit in Progress. It was brief. All systems are under review. No employee action required. Whistleblower protections are active under Clause 4C. L. Clark. The message stunned everyone. By invoking whistleblower protections, Leonard had effectively granted immunity to anyone willing to speak. Within an hour, anonymous statements began pouring into the internal ethics portal. Details of falsified performance reports, pressure from upper management, and community program cuts that had never reached the towns they were promised to help. Mara forwarded the first summary to Leonard's temporary office, a small, unused conference room on the 10th floor. When she arrived, he was sitting at the table with his old laptop open, reading the submissions one by one. His expression wasn't anger. It was heartbreak. They wanted to do right, he murmured, but leadership taught them wrong. Mara hesitated. Mr. Clark, the board wants a statement from you before the market closes. He nodded slowly. They'll have it. The board convenes at 2 p.m. The board gathered in the main conference hall. The air smelled faintly of coffee and tension. Some directors looked fearful, others relieved, like people who had secretly hoped for this day but never thought it would come. Ethan Ward entered last. His tie was gone, his confidence thinner now. He avoided Leonard's gaze as he took a seat. Leonard stood at the far end of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, today isn't a crisis. It's a correction. He placed a file folder in the center of the table, his audit summary. These are the discrepancies your leadership team signed off on. You can deny them or you can fix them. But if you choose denial, the system I built will forward these findings to federal oversight within 72 hours. The lawyer opened her mouth, but Leonard raised a hand. No arguments today, just accountability. The CFO, an older man with silver hair, leaned forward. Leonard.
What do you want from us?
Leonard's answer came without hesitation. 3 things. Restitution for affected communities, reinstatement for laid-off staff, and a transparent restructuring that prioritizes ethics above earnings. Ethan scoffed under his breath. You'll bankrupt us. Leonard looked at him evenly. No, Ethan. Greed nearly did that already. The boardroom fell silent again. Then, one by one, hands began to rise, not out of fear, but conviction. The vote was unanimous. The public reckoning by 5 p.m. The company released a statement to the press. Clark Systems is undergoing a founder-led transparency audit, following reports of internal misuse of community development funds. Our commitment remains unchanged: integrity, equity, and innovation. Founder Leonard Clark will oversee reforms effective immediately. News. Anchors praised the move as unprecedented in corporate accountability. The viral clip of Leonard being turned away in the lobby now reappeared, this time with a new caption. He came back for more than profit. The aftermath inside later that evening. Leonard stood in the lobby again, watching as employees left for the day. Some stopped to shake his hand. Others just nodded silently, gratitude in their eyes. Denise, the janitor whose letter had started it all, approached quietly. Did I do the right thing, sir? Leonard smiled. You reminded me who we built this for. She hesitated. They said you're back in charge. No, he said softly. Just back on duty. The elevator chimed somewhere behind them. The hum of the waterfall returned, steady and calm, the same sound that had been there on the company's first day. Outside, dusk settled over the city, but inside the building, the lights stayed on long past closing. People were working again, but this time with purpose. The reckoning had not ended the company. It had purified it. Part 6. Resolution. The quiet win too. Weeks later, the building no longer buzzed with panic. The tension had softened into steady, determined work. Where once whispers of fear had filled the corridors, now came the sound of collaboration, voices trading ideas.
Screens glowing late into the evening for all the right reasons. The plaque beside the main elevator had been replaced.
It no longer listed just board members, but stewards of Clark Systems' integrity first. Leonard Clark walked those halls quietly, his presence no longer an anomaly but a reassurance. People greeted him with smiles, humble, grateful, real. The aftershock settles. The audit concluded faster than expected. Millions in misdirected funds were traced, recovered and redirected to the community projects they were meant for. Rural libraries reopened, job training programs restarted, and the company's reputation, once tainted, began to rebuild through transparency rather than marketing. Ethan Ward had resigned 3 days after the board vote. In his final statement, he called Leonard a relic of another age. Leonard had simply replied, "Honesty doesn't age." Mara Quinn, the HR director, became interim CEO by unanimous decision. "We don't need flash," Leonard had said at her appointment. "We need conscience." The meeting one morning, Leonard visited the modest workspace where Denise, the janitor who'd written him that letter, was polishing the chrome base of a sculpture. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Clark, sir, you shouldn't be down here," he smiled. "Funny, they told me that last time too." Her laugh was shy. "You really changed everything." He shook his head. "No, Denise, you did. You saw something wrong and you spoke up. That's how every great change starts." He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a printed letter and a badge. She read the top line aloud, voice trembling. "Employee Integrity Council, founding member, Denise Harper." She looked at him, eyes wet. "You mean me?" "You kept us honest," Leonard said softly. "Now help others do the same." She pressed the envelope to her chest, whispering, "Thank you." The media storm fades. The world had moved on to new headlines, as it always does. But for those inside Clark Systems, something lasting had shifted. The quarterly report, once filled with inflated numbers, now opened with a new line at the top of page 1, "Founded on trust." Rebuilt on truth, investors didn't flee. In fact, more came. The market liked accountability, it turned out, and customers responded with loyalty stronger than before. But for Leonard, the numbers meant little. The true reward came one quiet evening, as he stood in the nearly empty lobby watching the light fade through the glass. The quiet when Mara found him there. "They're asking if you'll stay on, Leonard," she said. He smiled faintly. "No, the company belongs to its people now. I'm just passing through, again. You sure?" she asked. He nodded. "I didn't come back to reclaim my seat. I came to remind everyone why the table was built." They stood in silence, watching the waterfall ripple over the stone. The sound was steady, familiar, a heartbeat of the place itself. Leonard reached into his pocket and pulled out the old worn keycard. He turned it over once in his hand, the edges smooth from decades of use. Then he placed it on the receptionist's desk. "Someone else will need it more than I do," he said. Mara smiled. "You know they'll frame that, right?" "Good," he replied. "Let them remember." He turned toward the doors. Outside, the city glowed gold in the setting sun. For the first time in years, he felt no weight on his shoulders, just the quiet satisfaction of a man who'd finished what he'd started. As he stepped out into the light, the glass doors reflected his face beside the company's name, Clark Systems. For the first time in a long time, the name meant what it once did. He paused, whispered to himself, "Still building good things," and walked on. Part 7. Epilogue. 6 months later. 6 months later, spring sunlight spilled across the front steps of Clark Systems. The building looked the same, glass, steel, and stone, but the energy inside it had changed completely. No guards barked questions at visitors anymore. The lobby, once cold and corporate, now held a wall of framed photos. Employees volunteering, students using Clark software in community libraries, families at new job centers funded by the recovered grants. Above those photos hung one line, carved into brushed metal: "Integrity is the true profit." The new Clark Systems inside, the air carried quiet pride. Meetings began with open ledgers. Department heads spoke plainly about mistakes and progress. There were no more shadow budgets, no hushed rumors about layoffs. Mara Quinn, now officially CEO, walked the halls with the same open-door policy Leonard had once practiced. Her motto, "No secrets worth keeping." She often carried a small, weathered keycard in her pocket, the one Leonard had left behind. She said it reminded her that access was not a privilege, but a trust. The community impact in the small coastal town of Haven Point, where one of Clark's original pilot programs had stalled years ago, a new community hub stood open and alive. Computers lined the walls. Seniors took digital literacy classes beside local teens. A bronze plaque by the entrance read, "Funded through restitution by Clark Systems, with gratitude to those who spoke the truth." A group photo hung beside it. In the center stood Denise Harper, wearing a modest blazer, smiling proudly. She'd been promoted to head of the company's Employee Integrity Council, leading monthly sessions about workplace ethics and accountability. When a journalist asked what her role meant, she said, "It means we learned, and we keep learning." The founder's life, now Leonard Clark, no longer came to the office daily. He'd moved to a quiet lakefront home upstate, where the morning smelled of pine and rain. His life had shrunk beautifully, just books, long walks, and a small workshop where he tinkered with old gadgets. Yet every Monday, a small envelope arrived at his door, sent from Clark Systems HQ. Inside was a one-page report. Community projects funded, scholarships awarded, ethics cases resolved. He never asked for it. Mara sent it anyway. Each week, Leonard read the report slowly, then filed it in a wooden box labeled "Good Work." The reunion one breezy afternoon, he visited the company unannounced, this time as a guest. The same lobby manager from before greeted him with a warm smile. "Mr. Clark," she said, "you're always welcome." He nodded toward the photographs on the wall. "It seems you've built something even better." "We did," she said. Denise appeared from behind the counter carrying a tray of paper cups. "Coffee, sir?" He laughed softly. "Only if you're having one too." They sat on the lobby bench, the sound of the waterfall behind them steady as ever. She told him about the new mentorship program, the quarterly employee town halls, and how Mara insisted on reading every complaint personally. Leonard listened, hands clasped, eyes soft. "That's leadership," he said, listening when no one's shouting. The final symbol before leaving, he paused by the front desk. A small glass case now stood there. Inside it, his old black keycard rested on a velvet cloth. Beneath it, a brass tag read, "The key that opened every door." He smiled almost to himself. It wasn't the card, he whispered. It was the courage. As he stepped out into the bright afternoon, a light breeze carried the scent of fresh rain. He glanced back once at the building's mirrored face. For the first time, it reflected not just him, but the people behind the glass, waving, smiling, working. He raised a hand in return and turned toward the street. The city moved around him, vivid, alive, honest. The world had kept turning. But something lasting had changed, and thanks for watching.